Hello. I'm going to do a super quick tutorial for you on how to organize your household task list in Trello. So I think Trello is awesome because it's very flexible. And so this is one way to do it. This is the first way that I thought of to organize this. But honestly, you're only limited by your imagination. So the great thing about Trello is that it really gives you a lot of creativity and flexibility to help you figure out a system that will work for you. So this tutorial is just going to give you one idea to get you started. So I already created a couple of boards to manage my tasks. So what I recommend doing is splitting up your task list into how frequently the tasks occur. So the first board I created was the master task list annual to quarterly. So if I click on this one and open it, this contains things that happen 1 time to 4 times a year. So for example, pay property taxes is once a year. So I just created one card for pay property taxes. Now, a haircut, I need to get 4 times a year each quarter. So I went ahead and created 4 different cards for that so I can track them separately. Now, this is reasonable to do for tasks that occur 1 time to 4 times a year, but anything much more than that, and it gets to be a little bit time consuming to create multiple cards. And so that's why I'm splitting it up this way. So I created a really simple set of lists here in this board to track when these things have been done. So they start out in the to-do list over here on the left. And then once I start them, I'll move them to pay property taxes. I move them to doing. And then once it's done, I move it over to done. So for example, pay property taxes, I'm not sure how that would be in process. It's just you do it or you don't, I guess. But for the sake of argument, let's say I'm waiting to hear back from my mortgage company or something. So this is in process. And then once it's completed, I'll move it to done. Okay, maybe a haircut, for example, I'll move it to doing when I make the appointment, and then when I've actually gotten the haircut, I'll move it to done. So this is a really, really nice way to track how things are going. And I actually have a much more in-depth tutorial of how to do things in Trello. But if you click on this little edit button right here, you'll kind of see the options. So you can edit the labels, you can color code with the label, you can add collaborators. You can move this to a different board or a different list, create a copy, set a due date and a reminder, or archive it. So get rid of it. So there are lots of different options for organizing tasks in Trello. And if you want more of a tutorial, I will link to that tutorial in the blog post. But for the sake of argument here, I just really want to show you a very quick overview of how I would organize my master task list here. Okay, so once we get to the end of the year, we've done everything on the list. That's cool. Okay, so it's actually super easy to reset your list for the next year. Just click on these 3 dots here on the top right-hand corner of the done list, and then select move all cards on this list. You can move them back to do, and now you're all set for next year. You can edit as needed. So this is a really easy way to keep track of all these tasks that occur 1 time to 4 times a year. Now, for more frequent tasks, again, it's really pretty time consuming. You don't want to create 12 cards for changing your air filter or 52 cards for washing your towels, right? That would be not a good use of time. So instead, what I recommend is creating a separate board for those tasks that occur more frequently. So to show you an example, I created a monthly board. So if I click on this, I just added a couple of things that are on my task list to do each month. So they start out in the to-do list. You'll see this is exactly the same structure as the annual to quarterly list. I'm just going to manage it a little differently. So in every month, all of the tasks will start out in to-do, and as I complete them, I'll move them over to done, like I showed you before. And on the last day of the month, all I need to do to reset this is just double click on these 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner, move them all back to do for the next month. Okay, so this is a really easy way to keep track of what you have completed for the month. And I would recommend doing this for the weekly as well. Create a separate board for weekly and manage it the same way. Okay. So that's one way to do this. There are actually lots of other ways, as I mentioned, to organize your boards in Trello. So you're really only limited by what you can imagine. So one thing you could do, for example, let me create a new board here. I could just do one master list and I could put everything in there. So for example, I could do annual, quarterly, etc. And I could just list the items like this. Okay, so to show you how I might do this, let's say I do quarterly, I do haircut. Okay, so one way to track your quarterly tasks is you can edit this card by clicking in the white space and opening this detailed editor. And then you can actually make a checklist, which is cool. So I could just add Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Okay. And that way I could just check off when I've completed Q1, for example, and it'll show you 25% done. So that's a really neat way to track items that have to occur more than once a year. And it's really not that hard to add 12 of these, for example. I'm not sure I'd want to do weekly, but you could probably do annual, quarterly, weekly, or monthly, maybe weekly and daily. You can kind of adjust, but this just gives you an idea of how you might manage it. Another way you could consider doing this, let me just archive these and I'll show you a different way. You could also do it by category. So for example, you could do home, kids, self-care, cars, right? You could look at it this way if you prefer to look at it by the category rather than the frequency. Okay, so this is really just one of the options, or I've shown you a couple of options for how you could organize your master task list in Trello. I prefer looking at it by frequency, so I would definitely start with the first example I showed you, which is the annual to quarterly, and then separate boards for monthly and weekly. But it all just depends on how you like to see things. So I hope that was helpful to give you some ideas. And if you want a more detailed tutorial, check out the link in the blog post.